Welcome to the Natural Way of Being video blog. This video is titled Expanding Your Continuum. Now, by the word continuum, I'm talking about kind of a range of human experience between kind of two opposite poles or possibilities, if you will. So the example I'm going to use for most of this video is like there's a full range between being passive and being aggressive. And then there's every nuance or gradient in between those two things. Another example of this could be, which has kind of been made famous by the Myers-Briggs and some other things, is you could have introversion and extroversion on the other side of the scale. And then there's levels. So some people say, oh, I'm balanced. They're balanced between introversion and extroversion. They'd be in the middle. Or I'm slightly introverted, or I'm really introverted. Those are examples. Another would be, another would be like masculine and feminine. Not just because I have a masculine body, but there's like masculine and feminine, or gentleness and strength, or yin and yang. These are all what I'm calling continuums. And so my premise for this video is we tend to get, usually on one side or the other, or sometimes in the middle, we get like kind of stuck in certain parts. And what I'm saying is it might benefit us. It might benefit us to expand our continuum and encompass more of the possibilities of life. And for our journey today, I have my first ever video blog visual aid, we'll call it, or prop. And it just shows a scale of a continuum, or a scale between 0 and 10, 0 being down here, 10 being up here. And so, like I said, the example, I want to get it balanced on my screen here. There we go. So the example that I'm going to use is I'm going to have passive be over here. So totally passive is going to be 0, and totally aggressive would be 10. Now, some of you, maybe assertive is in the middle, but we're just going to call this, and we'll call it an aggressiveness scale. 0 aggression here, total aggression here. So it's a scale of aggression, or passive to aggressive. So what we tend to do, I'm going to use myself as an example quite a bit in this video. We tend to get stuck. So when I was conditioned as a kid, I was conditioned to be passive. Okay, so I hung out between, let's say, just about between 0 and 3. I think 3 is about here. And that's where it was safe for me to be. It was only safe for me to be between 0 and 3. It was not safe to be 4, 5, let alone 8. Okay, actually, these numbers were reserved for my father, who was not passive. He was more aggressive. And so I was conditioned to not be like my father, mostly from my mother, but what's a whole other story. And so this was my range. Okay, he got the other 7. So anyway, that's a little more psychology than maybe we needed to go. But just so you know, that's where these things come from. So I was conditioned to be between 0 and 3. So as I started dating and I went to college, I started seeing that this was limiting. Okay, I saw my friends, going out here, and I wasn't. And so what I started doing is I started expanding myself and expanding my continuum. And that's kind of my premise, is that maybe there'd be a benefit from expanding that. So there are two primary ways that I benefit by expanding my continuum. Okay, the first is, as I mentioned earlier, is I get more possibilities. I get a more dynamic range of possibilities. When I'm only get 30% of my possibilities between 0 and 3, I get 100% if I have the whole thing. Now you may say, well, do you really want to be hanging out as total aggression? Probably not, but every now and then it might not be the worst thing to be a 10 if I'm needing to defend my child or I'm defend my life, it might not be bad to be a 10. But anyway, the idea is that we get more options, more possibilities if we expand. Okay. And, in each one of these, I could say each number, which of course it doesn't really work that way, but just say each phase along the way, each gradation as I'm getting more aggression has a different energy. So if I experience 4, say I push myself and I get out of my comfort zone and I experience 4, I get to experience the energy of 4. If I get really rowdy and experience 7, I get to experience the energy of 7. And then I awaken that energy inside of me. And so and then people can feel that when I express myself as a 7, it feels different than expressing myself as a 3. And so then I get to be more dynamic. I have a larger dynamic range of energy and possibilities and behaviors. And so that's the one benefit of expanding, more possibilities. Let me give you an example. Another self-example here. So I'm like, I don't know, I think I was a freshman in college, 18 years old, and I went to a concert by The Who, which was really cool, an awesome band to see them. It was a treat to see The Who. And it was in this huge venue, like 100,000 people. It was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and there was like 100,000 people there. And Philly, if you've seen Philly, like Philadelphia Eagles, if you've ever been to Philly, or it can be a pretty rowdy town. They don't hang out between 0 and 3 in Philadelphia. I'll just say that. So I'm at Philadelphia. I'm with my girlfriend. I'm like, it seems like a cool thing. I'm taking my girlfriend to the Who concert, right? And so what happens is in the middle of the concert, my girlfriend kind of whispers in my ear and tells me that the guy behind her just grabbed her butt. And she's looking at me like, I'd like you to do something about this. You're the guy here. And so now I'm operating from 0 to 3. And so what I do is I say, excuse me, like, dude, excuse me, but it just came to my attention that you may have grabbed my girlfriend's butt and that's really making her uncomfortable. So I'd appreciate it if maybe you wouldn't do that. I don't know if I use those words, but almost using like nonviolent communication or whatever. But may not have been. Now, fortunately, the guy was just really drunk and he ended up saying, "Oh, sorry, man." It worked. And he ended up shaking my hand, which was bad because my girlfriend looked over and saw me shaking the hand of the guy that just grabbed her butt, which was bad. But anyway, but the thing is like, if that guy wasn't as nice of a guy as he ended up being, that 3 energy of excuse me, that passive approach might not have worked. I might have needed a 7 or an 8, and I could just say, like really, don't go there. My girlfriend says you just grabbed her butt, don't go there. Like, leave her alone, leave her the fuck alone. That might be 8, 9, right? And see that energy, he's gonna feel that energy. Now, some people would say that's gonna get you in a fight. Often the case is not, because feeling that energy, it's like a show of force, and he's like, okay, better leave this guy, it's not worth it, I'll leave this guy alone. And so that's an example of how having a bigger range might be of benefit. The second benefit of expanding your continuum is you get to be more balanced. And what I mean by that is, if I'm only operating between 0 and 3, my midpoint balance is going to be 1.5. Okay? And then also, when I'm at 3, to me, it feels like 10. Okay? To me, 3 feels like uber aggressive. But the reality is, in real life, it's still somewhat passive. And so I'm kind of, if I allow myself to, like, I stood up at that concert and I allow myself to tell that guy, what are you doing? And I become an 8. If I embody 8, then that means I now have expanded, and not just this one experience is going to do it, but then I allow myself to have other more aggressive experiences, and I'm now operate between 0 and 8. My balance is now going to be like 4. I think that's 4. Yeah, 4. And so anyway, then I'm more balanced. And the other thing is that I can kind of, by experiencing the whole continuum, I can kind of feel where my natural place to be is. We don't all have to be at 5. In fact, I've experienced most, like I would say, most all of the continuum, and I probably am still choosing to hang out around 4 would be my balance. I'm still more on the chill side. But then I get to choose that. See, but when I'm conditioned, I don't get, don't get choice. I'm just like conditioned to be here, and I don't even know that I'm locked here. Okay, but if I experience the whole thing, then I can choose where I want to mostly hang out, and then I can pull up different energies. Say I'm mostly 4, but then if I need 8 or I need 6, it's there. Sometimes I might need 6 to get through to a client, and just really have a strong example. And then I have more possibilities and more balance. Okay, so an example of this balance thing that I'm talking about would be where this kind of teaching came from. My teacher was trying to help me, get out of 0 to 3 as I was dating and interacting with women and all things, not just that, but the way I live life. And so, but as far as dating goes, what he said is ideally what you would have done in adolescence is you would have allowed yourself to experience everything from being, the wimp to the total chauvinist, kind of the jerk or the chauvinist with women. Not that you want to be chauvinistic as a person, but if I experience those two extremes, then I can find balance in the middle. Unfortunately, I didn't allow myself to experience all those things, and I spent most of my 20s broadening that out and having different experiences with women. But still, I ended up having to do that to expand it out and find my balance of being a 4 or wherever I choose to hang out. But now I choose, because it's like I can be chauvinistic, I can be wimpy, I can be gentle, I can be strong. Where do I want to hang out? And it's like, I feel this feels right to me, and I'm now choosing that balance. So there's 2 basic ways I'm going to talk about of how we can expand our continuum, if you will. And the first one of those is we can kind of do the old, what I talk about a lot, is expand our comfort zone. So when we find ourselves kind of hitting our comfort zone, say like when I was a kid, that would be 3, and later on, maybe in my early 20s, it might have been 6. It's like when I find myself hitting my edge, if you will, and I see a possibility to step outside of that edge, I can take a risk and allow myself to go from 3 to 4. And usually when I do this, I'm going to feel really vulnerable. I'm going to feel mortified, just horrified that I actually acted like a 4. Because remember, 3 to me felt aggressive, so 4 felt over the top. And so it's a lot. It takes a lot of courage to allow yourself to expand your comfort zone. And by doing that, you're allowing yourself, and I had a teacher. It's really good to have a coach that tells you, I know it felt like 4 felt like 12 to you, but actually it was just 4. And that was actually kind of cool that you had the strength to do that. And then it's like, okay, maybe next time I'll try 5. And so that's the one way, is we can challenge ourselves to expand. So a second way to expand the continuum is to expose myself to people and to experiences that are outside of my comfort zone. Okay, so before I was just expanding it. Now I'm exposing myself. So if I'm here, I can hang out with assertive people and people that even have the ability to be aggressive. And then they model that, and I get to realize that those spaces are even possibilities. Because, when I was here in my sheltered little world, I didn't even know that these were options. So if I hang out with someone that's like out here, then I was like, oh, this guy was a 7 and it seemed to work for him. It wasn't bad. It actually was cool being a 7 for him in that experience. Maybe it opens the door for me to try that. So another example is that same time that I went to the concert. I'm a freshman in college. And I grew up in a little town called Emmaus, Pennsylvania. It was like the suburbs. It was pretty sheltered. I didn't have to worry about my life very much, or I was never in danger. It was pretty sheltered existence and kind of a middle class, burbs neighborhood that I grew up. And so when I went to college, the people I hung out, I had this double room dorm that we actually moved around, and I got to be with the people. And two of the people, there was 4 of us. I was from there, and there was 3. I had 3 roommates, and 2 of them were from inner city Philadelphia, and 1 of them was from inner city Pittsburgh. Okay, I was at Penn State, in the middle of the state, and so there was people from all over Pennsylvania. And so I exposed myself to these people, and I started seeing, wow, I was pretty naive. There's a whole world out here. And they would talk about the different things that they did. And I remember Jim, we used to call him Jim-I, was his nickname. And we had this person in our dorms that was stealing stuff. We kind of had this person that was stealing stuff, and we couldn't figure out who it was. And so, and a lot of our things were getting stolen, and it was maddening. It really, we didn't have a lot of things, and the little things we had were getting stolen in college. And so one day Jim-I comes up to me. He's like, dude, I helped you out. He said, we found the thief. Okay. And I'm like, well, that's cool. He goes, and I took care of it for you. And I'm like, oh, okay. How did you do that, Jim-I? And he goes, well, we took him out. Out behind back or whatever, out in the woods. And we just totally beat the shit out of him. And I was just like, I was mortified. It's like, oh my God, and he goes, you know what? I even gave him a punch for you. And I'm just like, I don't know that. Thanks. I could tell. Here was Jim. He was doing this out of love for me, but it was like, oh my God, I was mortified. Now, I'm not saying that I don't condone the behavior of him beating someone up that way, but what it did was it showed me I'm 0 to 3. It showed me, 10, right? It showed me 9, 10. Okay. And his intention was good, and he just grew up. That's what people in inner Philly did when someone broke stole or broke the moral or the ethic of the town. That's what they did. They took him out and they taught him a lesson. I mean, they didn't hurt him permanently, but they were going to make sure that he never stole again. And so by hanging out with these guys, I got to see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They showed me that these were possibilities. And see, I didn't even know that was possible. I didn't even, my sheltered, I didn't even know that people beat each other up that way to teach them a lesson. And so now I'm more broad, and then I can have a bigger range of possibility, and I can find my balance more. And I wanted to talk about one other example, if you will. I guess it's not a total example, but it's a conceptual example. Is in Buddhism, they talk about the middle path. Okay. And to me, now that might mean different people, can't be totally sure how the Buddha intended it, but my truth of it is finding that balance. Okay. And so my question is if we don't have a broad continuum and we haven't experienced like introversion and extroversion, passivity and aggression, like how can we find a middle path? So anyway, that's my video blog for this week. I hope you enjoy your week and that you have a broad range of experience this week. And I will see you in a week. I hope you guys liked my visual aid. It was, it's pretty, I think it's pretty cool. Anyway, thank you so much.